live on your side. First Alert Weather Extra starts right now.
And we have a very special First Alert Weather Extra for you tonight as we look back to the 2005 hurricane season, which was a benchmark for tropical activity. Lots of active weather that year. Major hurricanes, including on this date, Hurricane Katrina making a landfall. National Weather Service releasing this chilling final forecast update with wording such as areas being uninhabitable for weeks, and high-rise offices and apartments will sway dangerously, a few to the point of collapse. Everyone was preparing for the worst. Meteorologist Lauren Linehan joins us now with an in-depth look at how Katrina started and how it grew to the monster storm we know of today.
Yeah, you know, Wes and Tania, Katrina actually had very humble beginnings. It began as just a tropical wave near the Bahamas and then eventually became a tropical storm. Now, the problem with Katrina is that there was a significant shift west in the track that initially had seemed like it would not actually manifest that way. So I wanted to show you a loop here of how the cone of uncertainty, that forecast track for Katrina, notice how it kept shifting farther westward, and as it shifted farther westward, you get away from that influence from land, from the Florida Peninsula. You eventually see that possibility that, hey, this storm has the potential to tap into some really warm ocean water in the Gulf. And so we can see Katrina actually initially made landfall closer to Florida. So that was its first landfall, right? And it made landfall as a Category 1 hurricane. However, the problem was that once Katrina got into the Gulf, it rapidly intensified. And so the second landfall happened on August 29th, 2005 in Louisiana. And so at that time, it was a Category 3 hurricane. Now, at one point, Katrina had become a Category 5 as it was out over the open water of the Gulf. But you think, okay, technically it's still a major hurricane at landfall, but it's not a Category 5 anymore. Then what's the problem? Well, the problem obviously was the levee system in New Orleans. And technically, if you look at the path of Katrina, New Orleans was technically on the west side of the storm. And we say a lot of times, okay, west side is the best side of the system. But you can just see as we look at this satellite loop from Katrina, started off as a tropical storm near the Bahamas, made landfall in South Florida as a Category 1, but it just blows up over the Gulf. It gives that buzzsaw look, that well-defined eye. And so even on the west side of the system, the surge and inundation of the water was so significant. That wall of water was so powerful that it broke the levees in New Orleans. And that's why we saw the devastation that we did, especially along parts of the Gulf Coast. Well, in 30 seconds, you'll hear the impacts left by Katrina across the Gulf and stories of those who overcame adversity. We'll be right back.
Welcome back in to First Alert Weather Extra as we focus on 20 years since Katrina. Now, Katrina had at one point 170 mile-per-hour winds, just incredible strength from this system. A Cat 5 storm moving through the Atlantic and into the Gulf of Mexico before making landfall. At one point, we saw the lowest pressure at 902 millibars. Tornadoes, there's some estimates, this shows 43, but there's some estimates that put it over 50 tornadoes over 8 states that were reported. And the U.S. fatalities, 1,833. And among those, most of these fatalities took place in Louisiana. Over 1,500 people lost their lives there, 238 in Mississippi. And as we all know, so many people were displaced by Katrina. You probably know some of them, have met some of them, because it was over 1 million people. And you think about the elderly and the babies, all those people that had to be displaced by this horrific storm. $125 billion in damage. That makes it the costliest ever And when you compute that in today's dollars, it's $220 billion. So very, very significant with the costliest ever storm. 7 million gallons of oil leaked into the environment from damaged oil facilities. I don't know if you remember that, but there was a big cleanup that followed all that. 349 miles of coastal wetlands were destroyed. As far as states impacted, Louisiana, severe flooding, and it was what they always feared with these levee breaches, and that's exactly what happened with this direct impact. 80% of New Orleans was underwater. Mississippi, record-breaking storm surge, 28 feet of storm surge. If you think about a basketball goal being 10 feet high, can you touch the rim? I can't anymore, but you multiply that by 3. That is the storm surge. Just incredible, that storm surge, with $9.8 billion in insured losses just in Mississippi alone. Alabama saw significant storm surge, wind damage. Florida too, with coastal flooding and wind damage. Because of all this, the National Hurricane Center officially retired the name of Hurricane Katrina.
As Mickey mentioned, Katrina took most lives across the state of Louisiana, where the failed levee system led to devastating flooding as all that water wrapped in from the strong winds across Lake Pontchartrain that altered people's lives for decades to come. Meteorologist Matt Daniels spoke with a former New Orleans resident who now lives in Birmingham but still carries the memories of the historic storm with her every day in the Magic City.
No one could comprehend what was actually happening. There was no way you could possibly wrap your head around what was going on in New Orleans. Like, this is not our house, not our home.
Amanda LeBlanc and her husband started a family with 2 babies in New Orleans that she says is a city like no other.
You knew all of your neighbors. It was so unique. And I really had no other perspective in life because I grew up that way. People in New Orleans are their family with you, whether they're related to you or not.
Her girls were the 5th generation of LeBlancs living in their house that was built back in 1942.
And it had never flooded. And we had been through Hurricane Camille and Hurricane Betsy and all of these major storms that historically people talk about when they talk about massive hurricanes. And we were protected by the levee system. Or so we thought.
Katrina shifted west and mandatory evacuations were declared in New Orleans.
Oh man, we might actually get water. Let's get everything up off the floor that we can. Just general stuff, thinking we might actually get a couple of feet of water in the house.
Amanda decided to stay at her sister's home in Montgomery. Katrina struck, knocking out communication. The levees broke and the water blasted throughout her community. Those who stayed were trapped and forced to go into their attic or on top of a roof.
And the water came in like a wall. And I think that's what took my neighbor. Her attic stairs were down, and so we never really knew, like, was she trying to get into her attic and the water came in too quick, or did she die from the heat in her attic and fall out of the attic?
A neighbor notified Amanda's husband through a satellite phone that he was sitting in a boat on the roof of their home. Her home was under 12 feet of water for nearly 3 weeks.
Everything that we knew, everything that was safe to us was gone. And I'm so grateful that God really sort of stepped in and gave us the inkling to go to my sister's, because I don't know what I would have done if we had been stuck in Texas, you know, with babies and going through the devastation and all of the trauma that we were enduring at that time. It was such a blessing to be with my sister and to be surrounded by family.
A few months later, Amanda finally had the chance to revisit New Orleans.
I don't think I got 2 blocks before I was completely disoriented. There were no markers. All the street signs were down. All the trees were down. And everything had been sitting in mud. It looked like something that you would see in some apocalyptic movie or third world country. Everything was the same color. And it was all dead. How do you conceive the entire town of Birmingham being gone? No school, no hospital, no nothing, nothing that you knew. And it was all you knew your whole life, and all of your family was there. I think a lot of us really struggled with reality afterwards. I think I did not realize until years down the road that I spent probably 2 years after Katrina living in a form of PTSD. it's just surreal. And so most of the time I feel like it didn't happen, like I didn't actually go through that. It changed my life forever. And it changed a lot of people's lives forever. And there are things you just can't get back. And that is painful.
Amanda relocated to Birmingham, where she runs a successful organizing business. It allows her to reach her clients easily across the Southeast.
There are just incredible people here who have really just become that second family, but it'll never be New Orleans.
Meteorologist Matt Daniel, WBRC 6 News, on your side.
It's so devastating to even hear those stories. Well, 20 years ago this month, as we've been mentioning, Hurricane Katrina devastated New Orleans and forever changed the lives of the people who lived through it. Tonight, 3 women share their stories of survival, loss, and resilience, showing how the storm shaped who they are today.
In late August of 2005, for students and families across New Orleans, Katrina began like so many other storms before it. A reason to pack lightly, leave for a few days, and wait until things passed.
We're thinking this is going to be a week max. It always happens this way. It gives us some more days off before classes start.
But for students like Loyola Junior Renika Cheney, that false sense of normal quickly disappeared.
And what should have been a 1-hour drive was about 7 hours. And so it was bumper to bumper because everybody's trying to get out. And that's when I first was like, what is happening here? This is very different. People are using the bathroom on the side of the road. And when you get out, there's a sea of cars in front of you and a sea of cars behind you.
And for senior Mashonda Taylor, the storm would derail her last year of college, forcing her away from her campus and friends, unsure if she'd ever return.
And then all of a sudden, things shifted. The good time wasn't the good time anymore. We're watching the news and the levees break. I remember us being in that room, very quiet, and trying to figure out what are we about to do next.
Like thousands of others, Renika ended up hundreds of miles from home at St. Louis University, living in donated clothes and starting over with strangers.
And so I was sitting in the Greyhound bus station, and they have TV showing the news. And that was the very first time that I saw images of what was happening in New Orleans. And my heart completely broke. I broke down crying, and I said, my people, my people.
For Sherry Lee Bloodworth Botop, a young mother with 2 children, Katrina became a mission. She was sheltered when they knew that Katrina was on its way with her family in Alabama. She felt called, though, to go back and help.
We put some bottled water or whatever we had in the church into the bus, and we started heading west. We started seeing people on the side of the interstate that were in their pajamas and just really dazed. I don't remember, honestly, the first week back and forth, getting people filling buses. I don't remember sleeping or eating. I just remember getting supplies, calling anyone that might know a doctor or a nurse or anyone that had antibiotics, inhalers, heart medication, penicillin, you name it.
But in the chaos, even first responders were overwhelmed.
You see ambulances underwater, upside down, in the middle of the road, and fire trucks and things, and you realize pretty quickly that what we were used to and the people that we were used to helping just weren't going to be able to do it.
For Sherry Lee, the experience changed her life forever, leading her to testify before Congress, fighting for federal reform, and devote her career to resilience and sustainability.
Disasters can open up unbelievable new opportunities for people. I saw people that lost everything, family, their homes, everything. And they went on to do something different and incredible. So I would say my message would be, don't ever give up hope.
From students forced out of their classrooms to mothers who risked everything to save strangers, Katrina left scars that will never fade. But it also revealed the strength, resilience, and hope of people determined to rebuild.
You know, St. Rose, where I'm from, they're some of the most resilient people that I know, some of the most kind people that I know, and who know how to triumph through trials. And so it's not necessarily that, Katrina taught me that, but Katrina showed that and displayed the fortitude of the people in New Orleans.
Katrina changed my life. I get to take everything that I felt and learned and turn that into what now is positive work happening in community where lives are changing every day.
What incredible stories. Well, though New Orleans stands apart as the epicenter of the worst of Katrina's wrath, next door the storm unleashed a 1-2 punch of devastating wind and formidable water across the Mississippi Gulf Coast. One of our very own members of the WBRC staff worked at our sister station in Biloxi when Katrina hit. Meteorologist Matt Daniels spoke with our colleague to learn more about her firsthand account as a journalist in the literal eye of the storm.
We knew when Katrina was coming that we were going to need to be standing ready. But until that point, a major storm hadn't hit the area in years. No one expected it to be, of course, what it turned out to be.
Shiloh Groover was a news producer at WLOX in Biloxi, Mississippi when Hurricane Katrina struck in 2005. Her job is to put shows together that you would see on your local news channel.
We're in the booth in shifts, anywhere from 2 to 10 hours, depending on the severity of the situation of what we're covering. We packed our sleeping bags and our pillows and some snacks. We were ready for about 3 days of wall-to-wall coverage.
Katrina was approaching the Mississippi coast with winds up to 120 miles per hour.
The storm grew and intensified, and we heard the howling winds outside our building. I started to realize we're in danger. And I remember asking my news director at the time, what is our emergency plan? And he looked at me like a deer in the headlights going, we just need to stay alive. You'd hear this gust come through and the building rattle and shake, and then it would kind of die down for a minute or two, and then it would hit again.
The large size of Katrina resulted in an intense storm surge up to 25 to 28 feet along the Mississippi coastline.
The first half of the storm, our phones still worked, and we would get these calls into the newsroom. People saying, hey, the water's on my first floor, I'm going up to the second. Hey, I'm in the attic, can you get me help? Can you get someone to me? And we had to tell them, no, like no one can get to you now. And those were the calls that just broke my heart. And once those phone calls stopped, that was when I started to be more worried about us at the station. Those of us that were there, as well as our anchor who had left. She'd gone home to try to get her husband and their dog and get back to the station. She was 9 months pregnant, and we didn't see them for 2 days.
Katrina made its third and final landfall along the Louisiana-Mississippi border during the morning hours of August 29, 2005.
I went directly over our station and our town, and that was one of the most surreal experiences because it is exactly as people say. The birds started chirping. It looked more like just an overcast day. And Katrina had this really well-formed eye, and it was huge. And so my photographer and I, at the time, we went out to the courtyard of our station, and we sat there and we looked up at the sky, and we were like, well, maybe it's over. This has been a really long time. And we were standing there just taking it in, listening to the birds, and I heard what I thought was a train. And I thought, oh, look, they've started to run the trains again. And next thing we knew, it was like a wall of wind, and it slammed straight into the station, and we watched it just pick the roof up like it was a sardine can, just started to peel it off. So we went running back inside to check on our coworkers, tell them, hey, the roof is coming off, if you didn't know. And they were running up to the front of the building to find us because right as we came inside, the tower fell onto the building, right where we'd been standing. So it was a moment where afterwards we went, wow, we are both very lucky to be alive.
Hours of wind and rain continued as the storm moved inland. Long Beach recorded a gust up to 122 miles per hour.
We see it all the time in our jobs. We see communities destroyed constantly. We see the video come down on the feeds. But to see the place that you went to eat lunch 2 days before wiped away, to see the barges from the casinos on top of your friends' homes and apartments, and I mean the entire town, everything we knew was destroyed.
Meteorologist Matt Daniel, WBRC 6 News, on your side.
As we remember Hurricane Katrina, I remember covering this hurricane as it crossed into West Alabama back in 2005. And up until that point, we'd already seen Hurricane Dennis. We'd had a tornado outbreak from Tropical Storm Cindy. And then here comes Katrina. That system, it moved right along the Alabama-Mississippi state line, but it ended up bringing some strong winds. Just a reminder that we can have hurricane force wind gusts even well inland across central Alabama. Look at Vance and Tuscaloosa County, a 68-mile-per-hour wind gust. We covered this thing until the power went out that night, and it was a long night of snapping tree limbs, and some of the damage after the fact was exceeded that of Hurricane Ivan. And you remember how powerful that hurricane was. We ended up with 4 tornadoes in the state of Alabama. One EF1 happened not far from Piedmont that night. Even in East Alabama, and the center tracked right along the state line. So way over here, you had isolated tornadoes, 30, 40 mile per hour winds. But look at the impacts. Winds gusting up to 80 miles per hour across West Alabama. And keep in mind, soon after this, we would be tracking a powerful Hurricane Rita. It was certainly a season for the history books. But the big lesson from Katrina is you don't need a week for these things to intensify. It was a matter of days. Katrina went from 1 all the way to a level 5. So that's why we have to act quickly and always check for frequent updates when it comes to the tropics. But we'll be right back with a final check on your forecast as we continue here on Weather Extra.